Boards have a really interesting history. A lot of it stems from kind of the beginning of training for climbing, when climbers really started to get interested in pushing performance in particularly like sport climbing. I think a lot of the genesis can kind of start with Wolfgang and the campus board in Germany. The campus board, you're laddering one pad rungs or smaller or larger pockets or whatever. The idea is essentially that you're just laddering without your feet, super hard. Wolfgang was a part of developing that as a training method at a university in Germany. It's why it's called the campus board. And
fun fact
there.
Yeah,
Did you know that? And a lot of the reason for that kind of apparatus's existence was action direct. Wolfgang was like one finger, two finger campusing because it's like super dynamic on pockets and all that stuff. But then the Huber brothers, also German, also insanely accomplished climbers, took inspiration from that and took it a step further and were like, well, climbing really isn't just ripping around with your upper body. There's this whole kind of tip to tip, toe to fingertip coordination and tension and power that needs to be developed. And so they came up with what I understand to be kind of the first quote unquote system boards.
Okay, boys, let's do it. Are we ready?
Let's do it.
Can we start?
I'm ready.
Can we talk about climbing? Everyone loves climbing.
Let's do it.
Okay, boys, welcome to the Testpiece Podcast. Will Anglin is back on the pod, and with him today is a bit more of the tension crew, some of the board lords themselves, both in content that they produce and, to be honest, the way you guys climb. Kind of strong there. We've got Michael Rosado, Quinn Spadafora. Did I say that right, Quinn?
Spadafora.
Darn. Okay. Thanks for correcting me. And if you don't know Tension Climb, you should, probably, especially if you listen to this. But it's a super popular climbing company here in the U.S., based out of Colorado. I'm in Colorado today. Michael's hosting us as house for this in-person podcast. These are rare for us. And they make a system wall called TB2, as well as any other training tool you can think of. Definitely all cutting edge. And for anyone listening, as soon as you're done with this podcast, you should go check out the Tension YouTube channel to watch the video we recorded yesterday at the Tension headquarters. Me and Tim got a tour of the new TB2. The video was an absolute blast, of course, but I love podcasting. And this medium just allows us to go way deeper on all things board climbing, which you guys, as I said, are board lords. So welcome to the podcast, you guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Psyched.
Glad to be here.
Psyched.
All right, before we get into the podcast itself, we're doing a little giveaway. We haven't done too many giveaways, and so I'm psyched on this one. Yeah, so while I was doing that video, while me and Tim were doing that video, I set a few test pieces, if you will, on the new TB2. One's on the spray wall, one's on the mirrored layout, and we're going to give away a tension block or flashboard, we said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, custom one.
Custom. It's going to have the Testpiece logo burned in and a Testpiece shirt. And how to get that giveaway is to be one of the people who climbs, the first person to climb the Testpiece on the mirrored wall and the spray wall. You have to record it. You have to put it on Instagram and tag Tension and Testpiece. And so, yeah, get a little FA there for the giveaway. But I got to say, I set these a little bit hard. I couldn't help myself. I just got psyched. And I realized that I should have set an easier one to make it more accessible. So we were talking about, and we figured we'd do a giveaway raffle to anyone who climbs any classic and puts it on Instagram and tags both of us, of course. And we want you to pick a classic that's your favorite and tell us why it's your favorite. You know, is it a specific hold, a move, maybe something that just like challenged you and you finally got it? Whatever it is, let us know, tag us, and yeah, that's the give. Oh, and make sure just like, subscribe, go to those YouTube channels. It helps you guys. And I know that if you like the podcast, you're going to love the content that Tension puts out. So yeah, that's my big announcement, you guys.
Nice.
Okay, let's get into the intro part. Normally, I intro my guests, but typically it's a guest and I say a bunch of nice things. But there's a lot of you guys here. Will, can we start with you? Just maybe how long you've been climbing, maybe a highlight in your climbing career, and what you do at Tension.
Sure. So I'm Will Anglin. I'm one of the founders, owners, and the president of Tension Climbing. And I started climbing in 2001. So it's been a while. And man, climbing highlight.
That's tough.
Those are really tough. Maybe it's just because it is relatively recent, but this fall, I think it was in November, we went on a trip to the Southeast, and when I went back to horse pens for the first time in like almost 20 years, and got to do God module, which is a boulder problem I've always wanted to do, and was always so intimidated by. And if you know the boulder, you know that even just pulling off the ground and establishing is like notoriously difficult. And so to be able to go back there with these guys, actually, and my wife and some other friends, it was just cool. It was cool to go back there as an older fella and climb a dream boulder.
We did a video on it. That's the that's the second UDV's video on our channel. Quinn makes a series. It's Undeniable Vibes. You said that a couple times yesterday.
I just love that statement.
Yeah,
Undeniable vibes.
It's kind of Quinn's like little creative outlet, and he literally takes his mom's camera on just out with us on occasion, and he made a whole great little series of that trip. So it's definitely recommended. It is good vibes.
Actually, where that came from might be my highlight, but we'll get there.
Why not?
Why don't you introduce
yourself? Go ahead, sir.
Quinn's next.
I'm Quinn Spadafora. I've been working at Tension for 6.5 years now, I think, something like that, and kind of do the media marketing side of things now alongside Michael, but originally started sanding holds, like was doing front of house or shop stuff, backside, and sanded holds for 4 years, ran machines, cut wood, did everything, and then slowly kind of transitioned into Michael's position, and then he's kind of moved along as well. So yeah, that's what I do at Tension. It's fun. I enjoy it.
What's your highlight?
My highlight. So, okay, Undeniable Vibes.
When did you start climbing?
Oh
God.
yeah.
I started climbing in 2015.
Dude, that was just like yesterday.
Quinn's 12. Quinn's 12 years old, by the way.
But more seriously, when I started climbing at Tension, that's like my second birth. I really did not have a concept for climbing when I first started in 2015. I was like, did not know. And then I started working at Tension and really learned how to climb for the first time.
Dude, I mean, it's funny to say that, but you know what that's like, right? Where you find that crew and you're like, oh, like this is climbing. Like I was just kind of playing around, and then when you have that pull,
moment.
that beautiful moment.
But okay, back to the highlight. We were at Area B up in Mount Evans. If anyone knows Area B, you already know. Undeniable Vibes. We were up there trying the 1%er, and me and Will were just like, this is the vibes are here, undeniable vibes. And so that's kind of how that was coined. But that's a highlight for me. I think I had never done 8B that quickly, and it was a real sign of progress for me. You know, I have considered myself a strong climber, not a technically efficient climber for a long time. And that was a breakthrough for me, that boulder, I think. And it was really, really cool. The vibes helped for sure. And Will with good beta and some of his sorcery.
And the moose.
And the moose. Yeah, I'll plug that video. Go watch it. There's a moose appearance. From a distance, it was safe, so we're good.
Michael, your turn. Tell me about your undeniable vibes.
Well, let me start with, let's see. I started working at Tension. Well, 2017, I guess, officially, or Yeah,
Okay.
it was February. Yeah, I think officially I started working for you guys February 2018. I'm the director of brand and marketing for Tension. When I moved to Colorado, Will and I had become friends. We can get into all that later, but basically he and his wife needed a roommate. I was happy to move in with him. I needed a place to live, and after being around Tension for a little bit, I realized that he needed help in the area in some of the areas that I specialized in, and so I started taking over social media, focusing on the brand, kind of behind the scenes, and then just slowly and surely started doing it more legitimately over the years, and so now I'm working full time as the director of brand and marketing. I started climbing in 2006. I think I'm coming up on the 20-year mark. I got a pair of climbing shoes right after I turned 16. Went out to the local boulder fields. We didn't have a gym in Birmingham at the time, so started outside. And yeah, man, just loved it ever since. And boards are a big part of that. But I would say my highlight would have to be the first thing that comes to mind is when Will and I were in Switzerland. I want to say it was our first time there because we've gone a few times now. We went to this boulder special edition, and if you haven't heard of that boulder, it's all time, right? It's this unbelievable. It's just this immaculate kind of A-frame like feature that just on impeccable stone. And we had kind of gotten there towards the end of the day, and the sun was going down, and I think 3 of us did it like kind of back to back, but we did it with headlamps. And because that boulder is like, people don't know this, that boulder's kind of positioned in people's backyards. So you're trying to be really respectful. Like you're not like, so when you're saying like when you're trying to root your guy on, you're like, come on, man, come on. You're like having to whisper. And so it was just a cool experience to not only do this like pretty off the deck boulder and it has a pretty real top out, but to do it like at night with all your friends spotting and like whispering, like, come on, man, come on. Like it was a different experience. And it was, I don't know, it was just super cool to have people around, and just, I don't know, we were all trying to be respectful, and I don't know. That's just the one that comes to mind. All of my favorite memories are usually when there's a good crew around, and it's not really about the number, but the vibe, if you will.
Totally. I mean, it's funny how, anytime you're on a trip with the crew, especially internationally on good stone, those are special. But it is weird, like what sticks out in your head. Like, oh, is this one? It's like, it is rarely the grade, which I always think is interesting. Oh, the crew. You guys got quite a crew. I will say that just walking into the shop, you guys call it, so Tension manufactures all their stuff, which is really cool. And so there's a lot of stuff getting built. But then there's some climbing walls in the back, and it's fun back there, you guys. You guys have a good time back there, so loved getting to do a video with you. But I also had been there maybe 5 years ago and just had a blast. Like the whole community aspect of climbing is really important, and I feel like boards are something that people coalesce around. There's this repeatability aspect, there's this shared experience. Now we have these layouts that can cross country lines and stuff, right? And so, yeah, vibes, community, really felt it this week. And we're here to talk more about boards because, like I said, you guys are board lords. And to be honest, I wouldn't call myself a board lord. I would just call myself a guy who climbs in his garage a lot on a board.
You're a board lord, Josh. Quit it, man.
Yeah.
Stop being modest. We know.
Yeah.
Anyone who watches the video will.
You know what's funny is I was thinking, like, thank you guys. I appreciate the nice words. But low key, I was like training for that day, right? Like I'm like, okay.
I saw you. Yeah. I knew. You were
Hey.
like acting like you were like.
That's a
then
board
you
lord.
showed up. You showed up.
That's a board lord mentality. Training for that day.
There you go.
I like that. I trained for it, and it's fun getting pushed to your limit by a crew, and that plays pride on me. So yeah, psyched to get to have that experience and to get to show up well as a climber. I had a blast. So boards have been around for a long freaking time. And I don't know if a lot of people really understand the genesis of boards or, how they came to be. And maybe I don't understand perfectly. So maybe, Will, I could toss it to you. Just kind of talk about how you view boards, how they came into existence, and now kind of like how the spot they occupy in climbing.
Yeah. So I think boards have a really interesting history. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but this is my understanding about how all of this came together. And I think a lot of it stems from kind of the beginning of training for climbing, when climbers really started to get interested in pushing performance in particularly like sport climbing. And I think a lot of the genesis can kind of start with Wolfgang and the campus board in Germany, followed by where the campus board, you're laddering one pad rungs or smaller or larger pockets or whatever. The idea is essentially that you're just laddering without your feet, super hard. Wolfgang was a part of developing that as a training method at a university in Germany. That's why it's called the campus board. And
fun fact
Damn.
there.
Yeah,
Did you didn't know that?
Damn,
Oh,
you got good
okay.
little nuggets. I love that.
Well, there you go.
Learn something new every day.
And a lot of the reason for that kind of apparatus's existence was action direct. And so Wolfgang was like one finger, two finger campusing because it's like super dynamic on pockets and all that stuff. So, but then the Huber brothers, also German, also insanely accomplished climbers in kind of any discipline you can imagine. And they sort of took inspiration from that and took it a step further and were like, well, climbing really isn't just ripping around with your upper body. There's this whole kind of tip to tip, toe to fingertip coordination and tension and power that needs to be developed. And so they came up with what I understand to be kind of the first quote unquote system boards. And what those essentially were is like, if you take a campus board one step further and make it just kind of a more like what we would consider a climbing wall, but really just effectively laddering a grip type up and down. There's all sorts of different workouts you can do on that type of a wall, whether you're targeting an energy system or a grip type or a type of movement or something like that. But it's really, it can be really boring. A lot of the most effective stuff is really boring. And, even in the 90s and even into the 2000s, folks made things like system tiles. I know Nycros, Pusher, Eric Hurst had the hit strips, which are, part of this genealogy as well. And then when tension started, let me back up even a little further. So I'd been coaching for a long time, and the EarthTrex gyms back in the day in Maryland started putting these adjustable walls in. I think pretty early adoption of that, and my guess is that Matt Bosley had and Jason Kale had something to do with kind of that happening, and so we had a wall on a come along in chains in Rockville, and as kind of a setter and a coach there, I sort of had free reign on that wall to kind of make it what I wanted. And my main purpose for utilizing that wall was as a station for coaching the kids. And so like you have like a bunch of kids and 2 or 3 coaches, you've got to figure out how to manage that. And so one of my kind of solutions to that was to have multiple stations. And one of those stations, I really wanted somewhere to like really introduce a lot of basic grip types and movements to people learning how to climb. And so I started iterating on that wall and eventually landed on, and really inspired by kind of where system boards had come, starting with the Huber brothers, and really just wanted to dial it up, like take one more step. And so really basic grip types, but rather than just laddering for the most part, trying to introduce like one more notch on the dial for climbing movement. So basic crossing and footwork stuff that I could program for kids and clients to learn on, and then being able to adjust the board allowed the difficulty to be dialed in and all of that. And so I was just searching around in the hold bins, looking for stuff to somewhat mirror these walls. And late in high school, I started hand making wood holds to go along with it, inspired by kind of the cellar culture in England. And that's sort of kind of my beginning in starting to be exposed to boards in general and like the utility of them, and starting to kind of iterate on where ultimately the tension board 1 and the tension board 2 would come out of that.
Yeah, I like that you hint or talked a little bit about that cellar culture. There's definitely just a memory I have of the schoolroom, of cellars. I don't know what it is. I guess in England they don't have as much good weather. It's just kind of, it rains a lot. And maybe for better or for worse, I don't know. They sure leaned into that training aspect. Although when you talked about the campus board and its origin story and Wolfgang Gulick, like that picture of him campusing with 2 fingers, I don't know, there's something about Action Direct. Now in hindsight in history, maybe we talk about Hubble as maybe being the first 9A, but Action Direct historically we talk about being a 9A. And it's interesting how what people needed back then was more finger strength, right? Like that concept of, hey, like, let's not climb with our feet on. Mm-hmm. Like, let's just, and like now I would say our conversation is more like, how do we get people to climb better with their feet on?
Yeah.
And historically, it's like, I'm sure Wolfgang Gulick, despite his incredible strength, I'm sure he was technically very proficient, just my hunch. Mm-hmm. So boards arose from this interesting way of just kind of like the most pure form of training, like a really distilled version. And then, yes, people started screwing on more pieces. And I love Will, like how you trace that progress into, getting closer and closer to training all forms of climbing, or maybe not all forms of more forms of climbing. Mm-hmm. And so, Michael, I know that you were one of the earlier adopters of spray wall and system wall climbing. Mm-hmm. And so I was just going to ask you what your first exposure was to boards, kind of early on, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So, well, like I mentioned earlier, we didn't have a gym in Birmingham until 2009. It was First Avenue Rocks. It was one of the first gyms around.
Dude, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you because I can't believe that you started by going outdoors. I feel like that's like very uncommon now, which is really cool. So,
for sure. No, like the first 4 years I was only outside, and it was a really unique experience, especially to what you see today. Because there was this one boulder field in town, which it's an awesome spot. Shout out Moss Rock Preserve in Hoover, Alabama. But yeah, after school, I would go out there and meet up with just whoever would be out there. And that's kind of how I first started climbing with the crew I started climbing with, because you would just see the same people out there over and over again. And so that was a really unique experience. But I didn't really feel like I started progressing until a friend of mine had a shed in his backyard and built like a woody, like a spray wall. So that was really my first indoor experience. There was also like a little outdoor store in Alabama. It was Alabama Outdoors, and that was actually the first like indoor experience that you could have. But it was in like a outdoor store. It's not like something you would we'd go from time to time just because it was the only thing. But like it was kind of weird. It wasn't like a gym.
So you were on the boards from the beginning, man. Like
pretty much. Like a spray walls for sure. I don't know. I gravitated to them because I kind of I don't know, like you don't see. I didn't see progress very quickly outside. I didn't know what the hell I was doing either. I was like, I was going out with shoes and nothing. Like literally off the deck. There were some times where I was like, oh shit, what do I do now? I would get, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess chalk is important. I see why now, because I like started in the summer, right? Okay. So then I eventually got like a crash pad and started taking shoes a little bit more seriously. So it was a weird progression there. It wasn't like I started in a gym and I was like, okay, chalk, shoes, nobody was really telling me. So, but yeah, like pretty early on, my friends, I had exposure with that little I think it was like a 45 spray wall at Alabama Outdoors. And then a friend of mine put a shed in his backyard, and I noticed that sort of my input, I was getting a lot more from it. Like I was seeing progression, a lot more quickly, when I would spend time on those boards. I've been kind of obsessed with boards ever since then. But when First Avenue Rock started in 2009, Joe Ortega put in a moonboard, and it was
2009.
Yeah. So the moonboard was, I don't know how a lot of people know when it came to be, but it was commercially available in 2008. I'm pretty sure.
What was the hold set? Because I guess I'm used to the hold set being 2000. Like what was on
Yeah,
it?
man. It was different. It was really different. So there were no LEDs, obviously. It was the black and white. I don't know the exact what you call them, but it was the black and white set, and then it was actually, even before that, it was only the what is now the yellow set that used to come in red and green, and I'm pretty sure that the early setups were like a sort of a mimic of the red and green. And I think you could kind of, so somebody else might know this for sure. I can't remember exactly, but it was kind of all of those like nugget holds. And then the black and white ones came along after that. And we were just up on it. Like Joe had like one of the first ones in the country, and it was sick. Like I remember, like I was the guy in the gym who would go onto the database, because the database was on their website. And so I got a 3-ring binder. I got the plastic sheet protectors. I was the curator, man, like from the get-go, because it was just an interesting thing. Like there was already a culture starting there. Lucas Dudoricus, Ricardo Capraseca, those are some early on guys that were like really into it.
That guy's still like setting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so and what people don't think about now is like there were a lot more layouts in the beginning. I'm pretty sure like they had like several guys that had several versions of their own sort of layout, and we were trying all of them. We would kind of turn that thing over every so often and really try all the layouts until we found the one that we really liked. But yeah, that's kind of my. I was in it for a long time.
I really want to. We gotta put the picture of you on board early on, and I mean it's fun to hear this genesis, and props to Moon for putting some stuff out early and really kind of getting that ball rolling. But since that time, it's changed. Yeah. So back then you said no LED, electricity. We didn't even have electricity back then.
Yeah.
We didn't have phones. So you guys have the Beast, which is the spray wall unto itself that is kind of famous. And something we talked about yesterday on the TB2 video is how a lot of the boards were, a lot of the holds, and I guess the board in itself was kind of inspired by the Beast. And so maybe, Will, you can talk about the genesis of the Beast, like when you decided to make a spray wall like that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, what we know as a spray wall now also goes way back to people having quote unquote woodies. And whether it's cellar stuff or garages, people had walls with just sawn 2x4s and stuff as holds, putting them in trees. So climbers have been resourceful for decades as far as, trying to make something in order to climb in the off season or train or whatever it is. And even now, like when we say spray wall, there's actually a pretty large diversity in what spray walls are. Like if you've ever seen photos of like the spray walls in Europe or Slovenia, that the comp climbers are often training on, they look different than our spray wall. And so I think in general, when we're talking about spray walls, we're talking about a climbing wall with a really high density of holds on it, where the holds aren't necessarily going up with the conception of a climb, like route setting a climb. And then it's up to everybody climbing on the wall to use the holds that are there to make climbs for themselves and keep track of it in one way or another.
So, what cracks me up is that when I started climbing, I would say, even though I was pretty early to the climbing world, I still definitely climbed routes or boulders, preset things. But especially in the early days in gyms, there weren't that many. And so you ended up making up problems. And then setting got better, holds got better, and we fell back into just more routes. And then my actual intro to spray walls or board climbing was probably through making up climbs again on the kind of like more densely route set areas. And then my gym finally got a spray wall. But I just think it's interesting how it started out like, we don't have routes, here's just some holds, like let's make stuff up. And then we really leaned into preset routes, and now we're back in spray walls. And then within spray walls, we're starting to, develop like these systems like the TB2 and others where there's specific routes up it. It's just like a interesting kind of up and down that, that we've experienced.
Yeah, well, that was my early introduction in the gym to like the bouldering cave. Even when they set, so it was setting with tape, it wasn't by hold color or anything. And the jibs never moved. And even when they reset, sometimes all the holds wouldn't even move. So in many ways, it was just a spray wall. And I think as the transition from setting via tape and to this chromatic setting that we're doing now has effectively eliminated the ability to have a high density of holds on a wall. And the reason walls look full now is because people are making the holds huge. There'll be a 2-finger pocket the size of this dining table, like that. And that is not an exaggeration. No. And that's sort of how holds have adapted to sort of fill the gap left by this, like all of a sudden you set a climb with 6 crimps up a 45 and it just looks empty. But we lost something when we moved to that way of route setting. And when you don't have very high density of hold on the walls, then once you climb stuff, you can't do makeups. You can't like climb one into another and do all that stuff. Cause that's really how I grew up climbing is you climb the stuff that's set, but you're also making stuff up with your friends. And so, yeah, I think it's all kind of partly in some ways a reaction to this change to chromatic setting. We lost this part of what the culture was, and we're sort of repackaging it into its own thing, which is kind of sick. Mm-hmm. I'm into it.
Yeah, no, I was just I'll say a little bit on that too. Like when I set inevitably, like I became a setter at First Avenue Rocks, and we were doing the same thing. Like our walls it ended up being more of like a spray wall, like that was in sort of a rotation. Like we did use the tape. We used a lot of the stuff that ends up on spray walls, right? Like the things that aren't commercially like acceptable these days, like they're a little too dangerous, but we were setting with all that, right? And yeah, like there would be multiple routes through multiple holds. They kind of cross through each other. It was definitely way more dense than it used to be. But yeah, man, I think it's interesting where it has gotten. And I just want to kind of fill in and bring together what Will was talking about with both the traditional woody and the system board, because that's sort of the foundations of the entire landscape of standardized LED boards now. And that's kind of what, I've been working hard at trying to kind of get across to people and try to kind of have people look at it in a way where it's not just another board. Like you can kind of look at these things in a much more high level way and sort of understand their foundations and where they came from. And given those, you can kind of understand how they're going to climb and what they're going to be better at. And so, Josh, I sent you that sort of internal doc that I'm working on. That's sort of like a
super secret.
It's secret. I mean, I don't know. You guys, maybe it'll be out in public at some point. But yeah, it's one of those things where like I think it's good to understand where things came from, because really what it is spray walls equate to like a asymmetry, and then the system board is a symmetric layout. So if you look at everything that's on the market now, it all sort of borrows and comes from and is in court and has the foundations of the traditional woody and the spray wall, or the system board in there. So I just wanted to bridge those things because we kind of talked about them at different times. But yeah, those two things are kind of the foundations to everything that is out now.
I want to really connect that evolution from a spray wall to the system boards that we know today, because if you were to walk into the shop, the tension headquarters, you will see this thing called the Beast, which is a big spray wall. And by big, I mean big, and by spray wall, I mean a lot of different holds. No color, it's kind of it's intimidating, right? Like you walk up, and I climbed a few things, and Will's there like with the stick brush, like this one, you get lost. And now we're seeing less of those go up in gyms, and we're seeing these boards made by Tension and other companies. And I just kind of want to explore why we now have them like that. And, one of my things that I really feel like, and I said this to you guys yesterday, is I love the Beast. It's a really fun, it's a well thought out spray wall with well thought out positioning of the holds, which is not easy to do. Just screwing on a bunch of holds may seem like it would be a good spray wall. It does not. But what's funny is, even though the Beast was probably physically double the size of some of the system walls that you guys have created, it's lonely. Like if you're on it by yourself, it's lonely. And for me, that's a big deal. I did get to session with you guys, and it's a blast. But the truth is, I spend a lot of time by myself. And, there's something to be said for having these climbs that are already established. And then something that's really cool that I hope you guys lean into more is that I can go onto the website, or I can go onto YouTube, and I can see some stories about those climbs. Like it's like, this was set by whomever, this is what they were doing. And it just makes me feel like I'm almost having a session with other people. And so, as much fun as it was yesterday, the truth is I'm going to go home and climb by myself. And, I encourage people to watch the video that we did, and you can kind of like hear why this climb was made by Will, Michael, or Quinn, and why it was made like that, what they're trying to do with it. And so, this transition between the two, like, is it an obvious occurrence? Like, was it a natural outgrowth? Do we think that there's going to be less quote unquote spray walls, or just, what do you guys think of this evolution that we've seen?
I mean, I think this is a good time to plug CATS, because I think so. CATS is a spray wall in the Colorado Athletic Training Center in Boulder. Rob Candelaria, like an originator. I think the cinder block wall behind the wall in CATS might be one of the oldest artificial climbing walls in the country. And the CAT spray wall has been around forever and curated by some of the kind of strongest and best in the biz. And when I first moved here, that was, I think, my first exposure to like the real community aspect of a spray wall. And I remember just the first couple times I went there, I was like, oh, no wonder everybody here shreds. Like, because it's infectious, you can't help it. Yeah. And that's partly the people there, and it's partly the quality of the wall and all of that. And I remember the bubble wrap project was a real informative experience for me. Chris Danielson said it, and I think Daniel Woods did the first ascent of it. But it was kind of also early days of sort of, and maybe not even social media, but just like, it became easier to make and distribute video content. And so we got to see the bubble wrap project in a way that I think we only were used to seeing outdoor boulder problems portrayed. And it's still mythical, and it's still there, which is sick.
Has it seen a second?
I think Carlo did it.
I don't know if Carlo did. I thought there was this other guy who's famous for this story where he drove to Bishop nonstop, split his tip on the swarm and turned around and drove home.
That's Waco, and I think it was James. Did James do it?
Yeah.
I call
what's
James
his
the
last
dungeon
name?
master,
Yeah.
O'Connor.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the strongest crimp climbers in the history of human beings having fingers, probably. Yeah, really mind-blowingly impressive. Anyway, I think that was a formative experience where I was like, oh, you can, and I don't think that it was the first. How to even say this? Like, it was something that inside that I was paying attention to like it was outside. And I think that, and I grew up climbing in the gym, right? But I think for even growing up climbing in the gym, for me, it was always about going outside. But I also love gym climbing. And I think that experience of just kind of watching that happen made me kind of realize that I actually cared about gym climbing too, for its own sake. And that could also be cool in its own way, that is kind of different and separate and like its own cohesive thing. And it doesn't necessarily need rock climbing. Yeah. And so, yeah, I thought that was cool. And I think what we've seen with boards is like just an expansion in kind of the breadth and depth of that community building part of what indoor climbing can do, gym climbing, when you can pair it with these things that have happened outside of climbing relative to kind of social media, communication, all that stuff, where you can be in your garage, Josh, and I can be in mine, and we can kind of be climbing together. Where when it's just me in the shop on the beast, like it's a higher barrier to entry, and it takes like a very specific type of motivation to be like, I'm going to bring everything I need today to make this session work. That's hard.
Dude, I am so psyched that you said the bubble wrap project. I have a hunch not many people, I just feel like that's a subset within a subset of a history of this. Like, I'll ask Carlo if he did. One thing is, I know that he did make it at his gym in Sacramento, the boulder field. He measured the dimensions of the cat's spray area and made a replica. I'm not going to say of all the holds, but a replica of the wall.
Yeah.
So you can just see him paying homage to that. But that really was a big deal for me because I love indoor climbing, and that was one of the first times as well for me that I thought, whoa, like this has this element of almost an end unto itself. Mm-hmm. Like, saying that you asked Quinn, like, has anyone done the second? And it's like, that's like a ridiculous question for that time period.
And
like,
it's something you only really see with like outdoor climbs. Like, did it get a second? It's like, we do that at the shop too. We're like, hey, who's done broken cog? Like, who got the second of that? And like, we have multiple climbs where it's like, they've become kind of like an outdoor climb.
Well, I'm curious because you started a little bit later, like when you started indoor climbing, did you have that same? Yeah,
it was the same as Will. Yeah, it was the same as Will, where I was like, it was a means to an end. Like, I was training on the board because I wanted to climb outside and be strong outside. But in the past like 2 years or so, it's kind of like transitioned into like its own thing. Like, I want to send Vanta as a boulder on the beast, and like that's like an outdoor. I have the same kind of anticipation of sending that as I do with like Echele or something else.
Also set outdoors very well.
Yeah, true.
No comment.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do a different boulder. We'll paint it black. Might be. I don't know. That's questionable. Mirror. I don't know.
Okay.
A rock.
Yeah, a rock outside.
Well, I did.
Same thing.
I did find it interesting that when maybe a few sessions ago, you and Liam were trying to do one of the boulders in the TB2 that was set for one of the spray or board lord episodes. I can't remember which one, but it was hard.
Yeah, 10,000 days. I think is what you're talking about, right?
It was
Is that Tool reference, by the way? Is this?
Oh, dude.
Everything Michael sets is a Tool.
It's either a Tool, Deftones, Smashing Pumpkins.
You're
or
dating
some
yourself,
random-
John.
Michael's
This is,
whole life is
I
just
don't
an
care.
ode to Tool.
Yes, I mean, kind of.
Interesting.
Hey, man, it's good shit. I don't know.
yeah. I don't know. I just, to me, that's something that I want to put out here on having a platform is we've all been doing it a long time. We've all climbed relatively hard outside. And I just like being able to say that I'm okay with trying to do an indoor climb for the sake of itself, as an end unto itself. And I think, I think it was you, Will, were telling me about, like an Instagram group or like there's these group chats of people who are literally psyched on just boards unabashedly. And we can talk about I do want to talk about how to use boards to achieve results, whatever your desired result is. But I just want to touch on again and say, like, there are whole communities around these system boards, and that's okay.
Let me talk about that because I don't know. I've said this for a long time. Like, I'm not one of those guys that can easily go outside by himself and feel super motivated. And I think that has to do with like starting outside and forming a group and a crew of friends and a community in that way where it sort of went hand in hand. Like I felt like half my power came from like the other people that are around. And I still feel that way. Like it's very hard for me to perform the same way without my friends around. Like it's just part of the fun for me. And so I think talking on the community, like I'm just going to say, like I think that is probably the most important thing about boards. And we'll get more into that, I'm sure. But that was why early on, like we had a community around our little shed woody that I started on. Like there was a time we all showed up and nobody was there alone. It was a community thing. When I started climbing at First Avenue Rocks on the moon board, that's why that's why I was so obsessed with it, because here I was able to, and credit where credit's due, like that, I feel like every system, and we'll probably talk a little bit about this, but every system brought something to the market that wasn't there before. I feel like, everybody kind of innovated in their own little ways, whether they meant to or not, but Moon definitely brought that community aspect to the table. And so, yeah, like being able to, spend my afternoon trying to keep up with some guy in Greece or Italy, it was awesome. Like it's super cool. And I didn't have to like rely on my friends to, who might have been at work or something and not able to climb. Like I didn't really have to rely on them as much. And I just felt that, that the thing that makes me perform best outside, it also is now sort of digitized and brought to these systems. And I get that same feeling from it. And that's a huge reason why I'm obsessed with these systems, because there is a community aspect to it. It's that thing that I've found so important in my climbing life, that is, it doesn't have to rely on people actually physically being there. And what you were talking about, the Instagram group, me and Will are on, well, Quinn's on it now. Those guys are awesome. It's crazy. We can't keep up with them because they're on it a lot. They have like full conversations before we can even chime in all the time. But man, like it's cool. Like there are complete communities and cultures around these systems, and that means a lot. That means something. And that's honestly and we'll probably get more into this, but that's a big part of what I'm trying to kind of make sure that we kind of cultivate and foster with tension.
We all started board accounts. I'm more active on my board account than I am on my regular account.
Me too. Yeah.
And like
10 times over.
Yeah, we comment back and forth. It's like that's part of the community too, is just like being able to message each other. Like I'll send a boulder. Nick Pellegrino is a good example. He sent me, Michael, and probably Will, a boulder and was like, go try this. I said, I haven't done it, tried it 40, like that kind of stuff. And that's just I don't know, just another aspect of the community.
Yeah, plus 1,000 to that community aspect. I'm like you, Michael, where I've had some cool experiences climbing alone. I have, but it's not reliable for me. And I'm actually curious. I may be painting you a way that's not true, Will, but I do think of you as someone who probably is better at showing up, putting in the work on your own, on the hangboard. And I'm curious, how big of an element is community to you, or if you see other benefits from kind of the more systematizing that you guys have done with the board versus the typical spray wall style.
That's a good question.
You need us. Don't lie.
Well,
You need
two
us.
things. One, my brain's a little broken, and I think that is why, or a part of, like, my ability to go solo stuff. Not like free solo stuff.
He doesn't
go two things solo
Okay.
and like climb hard or bring that to like a workout or something like that. But I think for me, the community plays a different role for different people, and there's as many different reasons as there are people. So for me, like, Quinn is right. I need these guys. And this is something that has been important to my climbing for a long time. And like, this is how I learn how to do it, is interacting with other people. Like when Michael does something and then I try, I'm like, I don't understand this. And then I can watch him and learn about it and talk with him and go attempt for attempt. And same with Quinn. And they have different styles. And everyone has a particular style, is coming into it with a different body and different experiences, and you can learn by climbing with or observing anybody. And it can go a step further with these systems because you don't necessarily always need those people there. Is that fucking
We
you
got
up?
Okay, we had to do this on Trash and Recycling Tuesday.
So if we got some glass clinking, there's a garbage truck outside, but it is what it is.
Well, to continue with that, while the trash is getting picked up in the back, this sort of ties into route setting for me. I'm a pretty big route setting nerd as well. To me, like, one of the things that's so cool about route setting is it's almost like the written language of climbing. Like, it's a way to communicate about climbing movement. And having access to a database of a bunch of climbs that other people have set is a way of being able to communicate with those people and learn from them in a way that you wouldn't normally have access to. And I think that's super powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so interesting how I set my little things, and everyone will look at the hold. Like, there was this one climb I set that really revolved around a slopey pinch thing that I just really enjoyed. I just thought it was
really
cool.
good too, man. You nailed it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Instant classic.
Mm-hmm. But like, it's funny because I'm sure that if any one of us walked up and said, I like this hold, I would have picked a different hold. And it's just, I like that idea of communication. It's like a language. I don't know if I'm a route setting nerd because I'm not good enough at it and I haven't done it long enough. But there is something really beautiful about that. And one of the things that's underrated is how difficult it is to route set effectively for yourself and for others. And so that whole database aspect is absolutely crucial. And I guess that makes me wonder, how do you use a database or set for yourself? How do you use these boards to target weaknesses that you have?
Well, I just do whatever Michael sets.
And I avoid all of Quinn's.
That's reasonable.
Truly. Me and Michael could not climb more differently. And we set very differently. Like you're talking about, you saw that pinch and you chose to do one thing with it. Michael would do the exact opposite of whatever I would choose to do with it.
Yeah.
So I just do whatever Michael does. But specifically for my weaknesses, I mean, I've learned over the years of how to set things, and I know what I'm bad at. So I think that's kind of the first step, is just knowing what you're bad at. And the board is great for that. You can really point out okay, I need to work on these flat, the flap underclings. And there's hold types you could be bad at, but just know what you're bad at and then go from there.
Well, I almost think that the first step is what you said, where don't climb on your boulders, climb on other people's boulders. And you go, oh,
Me and Will also set really well for each other. I feel like power boulders is like kind of something I just instinctively set, and Will sets these subtle body position things, and like that's what I need to work on.
I have so much trouble with their boulders. I don't like to admit it, but Will climbs super leggy. Like he is really good with his lower body.
More leg than arm.
And just and then Quinn's super powerful. He's a giant. It's kind of, he's got a 5'6" arm span or something.
5'6".
I mean
6'5". Those are very different.
He's a T-Rex. Sorry, sorry. 6'5". So it's hard to keep up with him. But as far as weaknesses, I don't know. I like to go about certain things go about it certain ways. I have a cool method where I allow I'll ask people to choose the holds for me to remove the bias of what I would normally pick. So, we brought this up several times, but we have it in a Board Lords video. But the second Board Lords video, the second climb we do in that video, all those holds, most of those holds were set or chosen by Liam because I was just kind of, I needed something new, and I was trying to not do the redundant old thing and the same old thing that I normally do. So Liam picked most of the holds, and then I created, something through it. Granted, there's a body size aspect that I probably still made to myself, but again, I get people to kind of choose things for me, and then remove that bias as far as choosing the ones I want, and then make things through. So you don't always get weaknesses out of it, but you definitely get more. You have to think more outside of the box and focus on maybe things you wouldn't have chosen. Yeah,
Will, knowing or seeing where we are now with boards, how would you treat them differently, or how would you have used them differently in your past when you were coaching with kids? Now we have these boards. You didn't have to come up with a mirrored set. This is kind of similar to working on weaknesses or working on basics. Just made me think, based on your story, now you have a great mirrored set that you created. How would you employ it now if you were to have these tools, 7 years ago?
I mean, I think the coolest part about where it is now is the accessibility to the information, having the database, and then as a coach, from a prescriptive standpoint, being able to work with somebody and identify areas for improvement, whatever, set or pick those climbs, and then just be able to deliver that to them in a really effective way. I basically don't coach anymore, but it will take on a client every now and then for a couple of sessions. And I almost exclusively work with them on the Mirror TB2 because partly because I know it really well, and so I can be pretty efficient with putting things together for somebody, but it's just such a highlighter of what somebody's good at, what they're not good at, left and right side weaknesses, and it just offers the ability to find an area and then also be able to hone in on it, because it doesn't just represent a pretty singular style. There's a huge diversity of different hand and foothold types, and they're all kind of in what I think is kind of an interesting relation to each other and where they're at on the board. And so I mean, it's just, yeah, I would be super psyched.
I just gotta say, I was surprised by how often we use the mirroring function, both in the video yesterday, that may not make it into the final cut, but just, of course, we all have our injuries, and it was surprising how quick we were to just say, "Oh, this looks cool. Let's swap it." Just I don't want to risk something today, but that also is a hint, hey, this is something you need to work on, right? And so I was surprised by, I don't know, I think my experience with mirroring holds has often been done in I'll say a half-assed way a long time ago on uninspiring small panels. And I was just I'm never going to do this. Like, this looks boring. But especially as you got into that larger set with the TB2 mirror, it didn't climb like, it didn't feel restricted. It just happened to have that opportunity to mirror. And I didn't get a chance to do the training aspect of using the mirror, but I mean, how could you not? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. Like, part of my weekly regimen, like I'll spend 1 or 2 days will be volume days. So what I'll try to do is like basically do a lot of climbs, focus on the average grade, maybe try to make it higher than the last time, like do as hard of an average as I can. But yeah, like I'm almost exclusively do that on the mirror layout because I try to do both sides of everything that I do within a given amount of attempts.
Do you notice a big gap? I'm curious.
On certain holds, yeah. But no, I mean, I think the hardest part when flipping is like especially on the harder end of it, like you're trying hard and all of a sudden your muscle memory, it really like sinks in and cements. And then when you flip it, a lot of times you're like, your muscle memory doesn't want to do it because you just learned how to do it and something's telling you not to do it. So it's a little hard to like execute at first go, like especially if they're a little harder. But
that's actually one of my favorite exercises is to work on and do a boulder that's relatively hard, flip it and try to quote unquote flash. After you know the beta and you've kind of done the moves, can you affect it? Because it is a different boulder. It's actually the opposite boulder in a way. So yeah, I think that's super cool.
Yeah.
By the way, on that giveaway, I'll get even if it doesn't make the video of me doing the test piece on the mirrored wall that I did, I want the first person who does it to do the mirrored version, because to me it's kind of cool that like that is a first descent. Like it's the same climb, but it's not. So you guys are on boards a lot. I know you guys have a product that is a board, but I'm curious, like maybe Quinn, what percentage of your time are you on boards? Like, and is it and also let me ask, like, is that ideal or should you maybe scale it back or up?
I spend the vast majority of my time on the boards for sure. I'll rotate through the Beast and the TB2, so I guess there's a difference there, but still boards. Yeah, I think that I spend like too much time on boards for the most part. I think my skills are probably, I would learn better if I went outside, but I just get sucked into the boards. And like I was saying, I don't really care anymore. Like I like that.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll get to the outdoor climbs for sure, but and especially with the TB2, like now I can climb on something that is like mimics outdoor climbing like better than anything else indoors. So yeah, I think I spent a lot of time there, and I think I've seen probably more progress in my climbing in the past 2 years since we started prototyping the TB2 than I have, you know, even outdoor climbing. Like so.
I'd agree.
Well, yeah. maybe let me ask you guys a different way too, because
sure.
Maybe I should ask, is there, I mean, you guys are board lords, you guys have it at your fingertips, but for a lot of people, it's a choice. They can choose how much time they spend on the boards. And so, you know, maybe Will, if you, well, it sounds like you don't work with new clients, but is there an indication that someone should be on boards more, be on boards less? I just want to help people understand because it's a tool and it can be an end unto itself. I have no problem with that, as we put it out there, but they're also in the pursuit of just kind of general climbing mastery. Do you have any indications when someone should adjust how much time they're spending on them?
I think it depends. It starts with the goal of the person. And then I think kind of next extends to what does somebody have access to? And then it kind of snowballs and there's all sorts of different ways that work. I think that there's a couple ways you can come at it. I mean, the boards as they are now, and like it's a flat piece of plywood. And if your goals are climbing outside on things that don't resemble a flat piece of plywood, you're probably missing out on a lot of the skills and kind of physical and even just mental parts of what you need to bring the full package to a project outside. But that being said, there is also a lot of outdoor climbing that really approximates to a board super well. I think we've seen that with all the buzz around Burden of Dreams. It's basically a flat piece of plywood, and it's something that you can actually make a relatively true to life replica of pretty easily. And so we've seen that just explode, but not all climbing is like that. And so I think it just depends on what it is you want to do, and then just tailoring what you're exposing yourself to in your training. You are what you eat.
Yeah. Really quick, I think we went into this in the last podcast we did, Will, but you had this kind of concept of there's a spectrum of difficulty is not the right word.
Complexity, maybe.
Complexity, yeah. Could we kind of go into that and just briefly touch on where maybe board climbing occupies it and why that means that there's both pros and cons around it?
Totally. Yeah, I think early on just started to conceptualize all of these different, call them what you want, training tools or whatever, but these sort of different expressions of climbing movement as a continuum of varying levels of complexity. And what I would say is probably on, one end is something like a hangboard, right? Climbing isn't just hanging from your fingers. Having strong fingers is a really important part of climbing, but it's like and part of why a hangboard's effective is you're stripping away everything else, and we're focusing on one very specific input and one very specific adaptation. But climbing requires a whole slew of different adaptations coordinated together into a performance. And so you can go from the hangboard. The campus board introduces another level of complexity. A system board introduces another level of complexity. And then I kind of put the TB1 after that, where it was really never meant to be like kind of a climbing board in the way that we commonly think of boards today. It was really meant to be a little bit more complex than a system board, and really suits itself to repetition, where the idea would be that you would pick a sequence of movements on a particular hold type you're trying to work on, or a movement you're trying to work on, or an energy system you're trying to tax. Repeat it. You can make it harder with a weight vest. You can adjust the angle to make it harder or better approximate the angle of your project or whatever. But just kind of a little dialing up the intensity or complexity, dialing up the complexity one more than like a traditional system board. And then the next dial up of complexity is where I think boards currently live, and where the Tension Board 2 is, where it is trying as best as possible to approximate quote unquote real climbing movement and a climbing experience, but still limited by this flat plane, even adjustable. The next sort of step there would probably be spray wall, only because in many, like, spray walls, like if you think about something like Cats or even the Beast, where it has multiple angle breaks, large volumes to kind of change the dimension of the wall in order to bring that extra level of kind of spatial complexity to the equation. And then I think you go a step further, where you kind of introduce what is effectively gym bouldering as we all know it now, and with kind of quote unquote comp style existing on the furthest edge of that, where it's extremely complex and it's kind of spatio-temporal fucking body manipulate. Like
it gets wild.
It's insane, and it's wild. And then you have outdoor climbing, and I think that's an interesting thing to me. Is like I wouldn't put outdoor climbing as necessarily more complex than comp climbing. I think we've entered a point where like it actually branches there, and two separate things where like the complexity, this sort of overt and exaggerated complexity in comp climbing is actually, it's almost more analogous to the demand of the subtlety that goes into outdoor climbing than a typical quote unquote outdoor style gym boulder. Anyway, but that sort of like lays out this continuum of like how complex something can be versus how kind of isolated. And when you're on that more isolated end of the spectrum, you can be more and more sure of why you failed. And the more complex it gets, the more you're dealing with the interactions of all these different variables that can make up a much more complex reason about like why something didn't go as planned or why you succeeded.
I want to pick on that. I love, first of all, I just love that spectrum concept. And I'll never forget being in Greece. It's this big tufa cave, and I'm stressing out on some supposedly moderate sport climb, and I'm pumped. And then I look behind me and I stem out onto a tufa and I have no hands rest. And, you know, it's just, I was lucky enough that I was able to figure that out. But I saw people climb at much lower of a grade than they were physically capable of because their mind couldn't recognize that there was a three-dimensional aspect. But I will say comp climbing has, I like that you mentioned that. Maybe they branched. So something I've talked about a little bit is that when you are on a board, you're there for a long time, you get this intimate knowledge of every hold, of every foot, every hold, and you can really go deep, and it's almost like an infinite complexity within that little thing. And I'm just kind of wondering, maybe Michael, like, have you gone super deep on indoor climbs, and what do you think that just tells us about climbing as a whole? Like, because there's an element of you learn that the same tricks you might employ on finding the perfect crystal on your project outside. I feel like I find maybe I am getting a little scum on the LED. I don't know, is that cheating? I don't know. You tell me.
But
like, what is that experience that we have in climbing? I don't know. That's a really wild question. So I'll let you take it where you can.
I'll take it there because I don't know. These are the types of things that I really think that the TB2 kind of brought to you're talking about these complexities, right? And it really wasn't until we got the system put together and all of that I felt that we had kind of accomplished these extra levels of complexity, right? And just coming from, I don't know, I spend a lot of time setting on that board, and I try to think of like really outside of the box, like, things that aren't super representative of like the typical board, climbs, or the style rather. Like, I think we've kind of come to know like there's this jump snatchy style that has been kind of thought about with boards and kind of synonymous with board climbing. But like I feel like I don't know if this is exactly what you were talking about, but I'm going to bring it to it. I'm going to bring it to the TV2. I don't know. I feel like we put so many extra variables that usually aren't there to work with, that there's this whole new found fun that I didn't really like. Of course I had this fun like on the earlier boards that I climbed on, but I don't know, I felt like I grew out of that in a way. I felt like there, when I would go outside, I would kind of look at the reasons I was failing as I progressed in my climbing, and I don't know, I feel like those subtleties I didn't really feel were represented in the traditional style of board climbing. Right. And so it wasn't until, and I'll take it to the spray wall side, like the fact that there's this immense diversity with spray walls, like that allows you to get a level of complexity that a lot of these systems being sort of locked into a grid didn't really give you. But bringing it to the TB2, I've really found that like I can sort of hone into the subtleties a lot more. Whether it be a texture situation, right, or a foot move or whatever. Like I felt like the sort of the complexity of the board climbing has sort of grown with the TB2, and I've been able to sort of like, I don't know, I'm talking in circles, but
well, I mean, there's
here,
beta.
Yeah, there's specific beta for sure. And
I was just gonna say, like, I've seen Will tick holds. You talk about grabbing the right crystal outside.
Yeah,
Will ticks indoor holds, and
unabashedly.
How embarrassing.
On like the beast, there'll be like specific. I mean, and it also goes for like the complexity of the hold. You know, we have like, what are the dimpled ones? Little pinch on your most recent.
Oh,
set.
that old one.
Yeah, old hold.
Might be Franklin.
Franklin? Okay.
Yeah.
I love the names of holds.
I know,
So
yeah.
yeah.
It's like an ancient looking hold, and it's got these really subtle dimples, and Will ticks it, so he knows how to grab it properly. And
different dimples for different moves for different climbs on the same hole. Just depends on what it is.
Yeah, yeah. And like, we talk about the beast being kind of like this, like the impetus or the, I don't know what you want to call it, but we looked at the beast and then we created the TB2. And so like a lot of those holds, like the Franklin hold is a great example. Like there's complexity to that. And so we just did the same thing with the TB2, and like we had everybody vetting holds and being like, is this right? Is this right? And so we like as a team made things so that they could be complex. So you could have like options.
Yeah,
I don't think I see Will ticking stuff on the TB2 quite as much, but I would not put it past him for sure.
Well, I think you guys are getting into exactly what I was talking about, where when you have a sufficiently complex system, which I think the boards have achieved, there's almost infinite depth within them. Like you can go deep. You can get obsessed with these projects on here. And I think that is some difference that I've been feeling now as I don't want to say committed to more board climbing, but happened to find myself spending a lot more time. So I was blown away how within this constrained world, I just feel like when I hit a crux I can't do, it's not that I can't do it, it's that I have to start pulling out more and more tricks. And I feel like I've learned a lot about climbing and projecting through it, where, to be honest, I haven't done as much projecting outdoors. I just don't get the time to go outdoors as much as I'd like. But I actually think that I've taken a mentality and learned something through this. Okay, like this is the dimple. And, you know, there is a tendency for this thing that boards are more like a grip and rip thing.
Sure. The jump snatch, as Michael puts it.
Which, you know, is a skill.
Yeah.
I mean,
no doubt.
And there's technique within that as well.
No doubt.
But it's fun to just keep pulling back the layers and going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen a love of this stuff as an end unto itself, because you can go deep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. So what Quinn was saying, like the TB2 was like a marriage of the beast and the thought behind the TB1. We recognized the utility of having a mirrored setup, but we also realized that we were spending more time on sort of the spray wall where we could really practice that complexity. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here because I should have done this disclaimer at the beginning. This is not a sponsored podcast.
It's not.
I was just grateful to get to do a collaboration with you guys. And the reason why we're talking about the TB2 so much is because when we go into boards, I mean, these guys have thought a lot about board climbing, participated in more hours than most of board climbing. And the TB2 is an outgrowth of that. And so getting to pick your guys' brains on, what is board? How do you use it? How should one use it? How is one set on it? We're always going to end up in this conversation because they're like, that's why we made it the way we did.
Sure.
Just wanted to put out that little disclaimer.
Yeah, sorry. It was inevitable.
It's fine. No complaints. I just.
But yeah, man, we really tried hard to. Well, I say we. I mean, it was mostly Will, but I feel like it was
very much a team effort.
It was a very involved from all sides of it, from the whole team. But yeah, man, I don't know. Like it it's really cool to have baked in these extra variables that usually weren't like part of the equation when you think about board climbing. And these variables are also ways in which you can progress, right? And I don't know, if someone asked me like the main mission of the board, I think to me it is like to be the singular most like best system for climbing progression, like, and not just in a singular way or just in a couple of ways. Like there's so many layers just built into that system, like on purpose, to be able to progress, not just jumping and snatching a hold, but like thinking about what your feet are doing. It's something I said to you yesterday, like, as foundational as footwork is, to me, boards have kind of like not really done a good job at like baking that aspect of like a foundational piece of climbing into them.
I told you my experience that was upsetting to me. There was a boulder and it required a foot swap on actually arguably very large wood hold.
Yes, we'll see in the video. Yeah.
And if your foot cut, you would not stay on. The holds were, or at least for me, and probably for most, that was probably why at least at that grade, if your feet cut, you would not hold on. And so it's this idea of asking a question, can you do this foot swap or not? And so this idea of progression is interesting because there are so many different ways to progress, and this all ties into good route setting, having different routes available that maybe are different styles that, not all of us are good at, and different people set different styles. And so, yeah, I just think that's like a really important thing to talk about is how to measure. Measure is always tricky. I'll just use that word, how to measure progress and what those things are that may get tested of you on any board, and maybe have, go on that journey and find out if you can do X, Y, and Z. And then if we really want to go deep, how to actually do those things. That's just an easy question.
I can touch on it a little bit, yeah. Well, with the boards, especially the, like system boards that have a shared database, you have climbs that you've tried 2 years ago that you can go back to. And like, I think we talked about this in the video yesterday, maybe not, but yeah, like I have a list of boulders that like I've done, you can check your logbook, and then like this one was really hard for me 2 years ago. And then you train, you do other boulders, go back to that one. And like, you can see the progression. So I guess that's just a really good like utility of the boards is tracking progression with that. It's hard to go outside to like a boulder in like Lincoln. You don't want to haul pads and go do another boulder. Like you can just pull it up with your phone.
Well, what's cool about boards is, well, at least our system is adjustable, and there is an aspect of like practice where you have control over the angle, right? And one of the things that we identified a long time ago, I don't know. So what was that boulder? It's like a shouldery V9. I don't know, but it had my number, man. I can't remember what it's called.
By the sword?
No.
I know.
Anyway. But point being, this thing was a NIMI. Like, I couldn't do this thing on either side. Like, I just couldn't do it. And having the ability to adjust the wall like 5 degrees, like I kind of got in this. Well, let me back up. So this is how I ended up doing it. I identified the reason I was failing, which was this NIMI shoulder move. Like it was a super high awkward foot. I had to shoulder into this like these cobbles that we have on. They're wooden. It was this side pull, and then you had to like
go to the cobble.
But it was an odd like shoulder ISO move that I just didn't have it. Like I couldn't figure it out. Not at the angle that it was set, but having the ability to adjust the board, like I put it back 15 degrees. And then it happened to be on the mirror setup. So I did the move at 15, like I think I did it like, so it was a 45 boulder. I think I started trying this at 30 or something. And then I did it on the other side at 30. And I started like kind of understanding where it needed to be in my shoulder. So then I pulled it back to 35 and did it again. I was like, okay, I know where that spot is now. Like I know where I have to ISO that move. I got down to 45 and did the damn thing. And I did it on both sides. So like having that ability to not only pinpoint what's wrong, but then adjust the board to sort of train that specific like weakness is kind of dope. Like that's what I don't know that people use the boards like that often, which is kind of sad because they're well, I don't know, in a facility that could be annoying if you got a lot of people around. They're like, hey man, can I like move this and try this move on both sides? But yeah, like there's a super like key component to that adjustability aspect where you can actually hone in on them like a weakness and yeah, dude, just like crank it back and then yeah, there's a way to work them on these systems.
You know what made me think of is because we're always talking about how it's great if you have a crew and you're all psyched, but sometimes you're flying solo. That's almost like getting pushed through a move.
Yeah.
You
Totally.
know, it's almost having like your buddy, you know, giving you that extra boost is taking it down the notch. This is kind of tangent, but something I haven't done much of that, shifting the angle, but my feeling is just my maybe wrong feeling is that boulders are quite different at 15 degrees different. Like, is it really that same muscle, or maybe it's close enough that, I mean, clearly it is in the sense that you saw that progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes it's like it's a thing where like it might be like an explosive move, right? Where if you're 15 degrees less steep, right, you're doing more of a vertical than you are dealing with like core tension and stuff and dealing with the swing out, right? So it kind of becomes a little bit different 15 degrees apart. This happened to be a move where it wasn't like a foot cut move. It wasn't like it was asking more of my legs at 30 degrees and then at 45 it was asking more of my core and it was, you know, it happened to be one of those where it was it was a static move and it was close enough to pinpoint, like for me to understand what was wrong and then go from there.
I think you also you didn't climb it at one angle and then go 15 degrees and try it again.
No.
So,
yeah, I don't know if I've made that clear.
Well,
yeah.
you did,
Okay.
but like I think that's part of the difference because I think you're totally right that Josh, that it can almost be a completely different boulder problem with a big angle change. But I think what Michael did and what you can do when you sort of stage in smaller increments is like you might not be asking exactly the same question at the beginning, but you're asking a more and more similar question as you get closer and closer to your target angle. And so you can, it's not just a big jump. I guess, yeah.
Yeah. And going a step further, just we're talking about like being able to pinpoint with adjustability aspect, like having multiple like feet types as well. So that's another way to approach it. Like, let's say you're not leaning on adjustability, but you're dealing with a bad foot that you just can't put power through, right? Having the ability to like, well, so like on our system, we have a lot of feet, right? And so like maybe picking a foot that's just slightly higher and then trying the move with that and getting sort of the movement pattern down and then trying it on maybe a slightly more difficult foot and then getting the movement, you see what I mean? And then sort of progressing in that way to sort of get to the target foot eventually. That's kind of another way of using these systems that I think.
No, that's cool. Yeah. And I think Will, you said also well where it's close enough. Like this is the thing that on that complexity scale, like everything is infinitely complex always. And so, fingerboarding does transfer. Does it transfer one-to-one? No, it's fingerboarding. It's not, climbing on Burden of Dreams. I don't think we're climbing Burden of Dreams, but anyways. And so just that kind of hint, although I will say that on those kind of static moves where you like lock off into a box, I'm being careful. I don't punch Quint. Like I saw like Michael like punch Will. You actually can kind of be like, oh, that's the position. Like, oh, my chest is like into the wall. And it's kind of cool when you're like, oh, that must be what that other person is feeling. And I love that.
Yeah.
While we're talking about the best ways to use the board, you said something about adjustability and not walking up and adjusting the board on someone who's maybe there.
Sure.
I was curious if you guys have any kind of tips on board ethics, best practices on using a board, or maybe some do's and do nots.
I think the most important thing is to talk to people, like human interaction. If you walk up to the board and there's somebody there, have a conversation with them. And if you're at the board and somebody comes up to you, have a conversation with them. I think that's a really one kind of a powerful tool for just the community building aspect that I think is both a big part of this stuff and just important for climbing in general. But from an etiquette perspective, like it's really, you just need to have a discussion with somebody and come to terms with like, hey, do you mind if I light this boulder up? And like, what are you working on? And like just having, if there's that entry point of just having a conversation with another human, oftentimes the other stuff will sort of just come out of that. The other thing is just brush the damn holes.
Dude, that was gonna be mine. You took mine. Just take care of your system, even if it's your gym's board. Like if you're trying to execute on this thing, take care of it. Dude. Like that. I'm sorry. Here it goes. I went to a gym that had a newer TB2 than we did, and I had a project. I was like, I'm gonna do it on theirs because they got that fresh plastic. It's got a little bit tacky. Yeah. Man, I showed up and I was like, dude, this is a shame. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, it was so caked. Like, that you could just tell that nobody. Yeah, like if you look at us in there, like I don't know. I try to get into a habit of like, I call it a courtesy brush. Like, even if it's not my attempt, I'm gonna brush it like when I get off most of the time. Just to like for the next person, for God's sakes. Like, so that's a big one. Like, brush the damn board.
It's your house,
yeah,
right? Like this for outdoor boulders too.
Oh,
like if I could change one thing in a moment about climbing and the community, indoor, outdoor, just like take care of the spaces that we operate in. It's like it's not that hard. And it's super important. It's great for all of your fellow climbers. It's great for the way climbers are viewed by non-climbers and landowners and gym owners. And like, it's
also good for you. Like if you're trying to send your project, like brush the hole.
Totally. You don't even have to be altruistic about it. It can come from a totally selfish place of like, I'm just trying to send my project, but like I won't go off on that rant, but like just take care of stuff. Like it's all of our responsibility to do that.
I make it part of my attempt is to brush. Like it's something I do. I don't know. It's like part of my ritual. And I also, we all do, you just kind of go around fondling holds. And I kind of like fondle, brush. Like I'm kind of just, before you try hard, you're often kind of entering this state where you're kind of just connecting. It sounds so ridiculous. I'm connecting with the board.
Man.
But you guys know what I'm saying. I'm curious about wood holds and if there's any special ways that you take care of them when it comes to brushing. And I'll also throw in, do you guys brush feet? Like, how do you take care of? Is there anything different that you do to take care of feet?
Brush everything.
Yeah, brush everything. I think I've heard people say that it's better to not brush the wood holds because it's tackier. I'm like, no, that's just like
because there's a certain level of foot rubber, like shoe rubber.
Yeah, like shoe rubber especially. It's just
you got to brush that off.
Everything. We brush everything.
The black staining from the rubber is just a part of the deal, but brush them. And the other thing, just I don't know that anyone will really care to hear this here, but like the way that you wash it is you don't take the holds off. You leave them on. And you use 99% rubbing alcohol in a spray bottle, and you like spritz, brush, wipe the dual text down or the front of the wood hole. Like they look brand new. Everything's great. You don't have to waste your time taking them off, putting them back on. Pressure washing obliterates plastic holds. Yeah. Like it's not good it ruins the texture super fast, more so than climbing or brushing. And you can't get the wood holds wet. Like it's a natural material. We don't put any finish on them because you want them to be raw and kind of porous, and it interacts with your skin better and the oils in your hand and all that. But like you can't get them wet. They'll swell and it gets them messed up. But the 99% alcohol will evaporate fast enough that it doesn't really like mess them up or anything.
I'll say that sometimes when it comes to footholds, when they're really full of boot rubber, you can use handholds too, but I will wipe it with my palm. Just one good palm wipe will sometimes.
On rock, bro. Michael does that.
Let me tell you something.
Interesting.
that I don't. I don't want to say this because I feel like I'm going to start some shit, and then somebody's going to take it and run with it in a way that isn't really conducive to sending anything. So, but yeah, man, sometimes those non-holds, they just need a little moisture. Not like water, but like, yeah, dude, like when you're pulling on the Foot of God module, it's like a non-foot. It's just like a flat smear on a 45 degree or whatever. I think that part's like 40, something like that. But it's just so bad.
Did someone campus that, by the way? Has someone campus that?
Well, people have campus the whole thing. Michael can almost campus.
I mean,
the whole
I
thing.
can campus it. I didn't know what I was doing when I was trying. But anyway,
You were basically, just when you did it, you were so bad at climbing that you had to campus it?
No, Michael.
I was bored.
Michael hikes that boulder. Watch the UDB's video from and you'll just watch him ice it. Like,
I mean,
it's on command.
It is my home crag. I mean, we've all got those. But anyway, but yeah, man, there's those non-feet, dude. Just a little bit of moisture, that palm, it just makes it kind of tacky.
Another thing about
secret.
brushing that I like, and maybe this is just me, but I feel like in brushing the holds is a part of how I like study a hold.
Sure.
And like you're kind of learning about it, both from like the visual of doing it, and you're getting a tactile feedback from the bristles and shit, and then you're like kind of touching the hold, and like it's just you said ritual. Like for me, climbing is just, it's full of all this different kind of ritual stuff that's a part of how I organize my behavior and the going about it of climbing. And that's like a part sometimes, like when I go to like spot Chelsea, my wife, on something or whatever, like I've like always got brushes in my pocket. I'm like brushing her project, studying the holds, brushing just stuff around, like just looking at holds, and it's like sometimes I'll go brush a whole crack. One time I got mad and went and cleaned the entirety of
was hilarious.
Guanella. But it's a fun way of
Also,
doing it.
there is a specific technique to brushing well. Michael, I've been meaning to talk to you about this actually.
What?
No. I think that you don't do it quite as well as me and Will. The brushing,
This is a pet peeve of mine also.
It's like just brush it, like get every part. You're not getting every part.
Yeah, get the part you're gonna touch so
Well,
often,
wait a minute
especially with
now.
stick brushes. I'm gonna get you
and
with
the
this.
Faza, like
Wait a
they're
minute.
sick. They look cool. When they get worn down, you're not getting the whole.
This
hold.
isn't
Michael.
enough context. Y'all look. Quinn and Will are like really sweaty boys, and I'm not. I got lucky with that. I'm kind of like middle of the line. I'm not. I just have good skin. I don't sweat too much. So look, I don't look. But also my hands are smaller. I don't have to brush the whole damn thing. Y'all got some big ass hands. So leave me alone.
All I'm gonna say is like if I had a nickel for every time I was in a climbing gym and I saw somebody pick up a stick brush and go brush the hold, then they're brushing like the front, like what you're looking at, what Ben would call the
What did he say? What did he say?
so
Yeah, this
Burkhalter
Ben
would call
Burkhalter.
it the back of the hold because you hit your back of your hand on it when you go by it. The front of the hold where
Yeah.
like, and they go brush it and they're like, okay, cool. And I'm like, yo, you didn't even like you don't even make contact with that part of the hold. You didn't actually brush it, but you think you brushed it. So that's not like, if you do that, this isn't hate. This is just like constructive. Like, hey,
I don't do
it's
this.
the part of the hold that you grab that you want to brush. The front is inconsequential, and oftentimes you've got to like move around. Maybe you have to extend the brush and get off to the side, but like you are trying to do the dang thing. So like, get it, brush it well. And when your brush is like all jacked up and has no bristles and is like too stiff, or you're like gouging, throw that shit away and get a new brush.
Brushing makes a huge difference too, by the way. Two little things to add. I understand.
Don't call me
We just
out.
had to
Y'all
go
gotta act
off.
like I'm like bad at brushing. Like it works for me. Don't knock me. Like do you? Like don't worry about me.
All right,
We'll see.
Jeez.
don't forget about good shirt slap on some holds can be good. You take your
Yeah,
shirt
that's
off,
also very-
also good.
Get
I'll
that
also
loose
say
chalk off.
be gentle with your brush. You do not, if your brush, when you take your brush off the hold, if it feels warm, if you made the bristles
Yeah.
heat up, you don't need to brush so hard.
And forget about nylon, okay?
Oh yeah.
Boar's hair.
Does nylon even exist anymore? Does anyone do that?
Some people still do it, boar's hair, and if you're vegan, Tampico fiber is still a natural plant fiber. and it's just better. To your point about the gouging, like, and they're even, you brought up the Faza brushes. I think you got to be careful with those Faza, the really densely packed pores here, especially on soft stone. Like you can gouge holds out for sure. So yeah, like you said, Josh, a light touch. You're just trying to lift the chalk out, and if everyone does a good job of light brushing, it never gets caked to the point where you feel like you really have to scrub.
Climbs change.
They do.
Okay, you guys.
that was our brush rant.
You got the most excited about brush.
Best practices are brush, and brush
clean,
the right way.
and clean your dang shoes.
Yeah.
At least wipe them
We were
off.
about to get on this, but this
Just
is important.
while we're ranting about etiquette and best practice, this goes for outdoor climbing, this goes for board climbing. Don't walk around in the dirt, pull onto a climb. I've seen people like standing in the snow in their climbing shoes and then pulling on and then slipping off the foothold and being like, oh dang, why? It's like, cause your feet are wet. Like,
Dude, yeah,
keep
it's
your shoes dry,
ridiculous.
keep your pads dry.
But also the other thing is that I feel like once people hear that, they go, oh yeah, like I want to sand better, but it wears away the holds. When you pick up sand and grit from the ground and put it on the rock and then rub your foot against it, you're polishing. That's like how you would polish something.
All you got to do, go to Joe's
I was
Valley.
about to say, every time I show up at Pagan that
Poetry.
thing's changed.
I was gonna say,
So I climbed on that like right when it got done, and we were like, oh, this thing's soft. And now it's so hard. It's so hard. And all the feet are black and slick and glassy, and the hands that you stand on are like that. And it's because like you go there and you watch, and it's just people standing around in a fine particulate that sticks to the shoe rubber that's meant to grab that stuff, and then grinding it over and over and over. Like it's sad.
Look, I'm going to do it because we're just, but look, there's a reason we make something called shoe spray. It's, look, whether you believe it works or not, like the straight up, it just clean your shoes. Like that's what we're trying to do. Like regardless of trying to market something to you and convince you that it's going to make you do something, it's really about just cleaning your damn shoes and being conscious of that. Like,
don't even buy the shoe spray, but please clean your shoes.
Yeah, don't even buy it. Just clean your shoes.
You know what's kind of interesting is that you would think that moisture or water or whatever might harm the sticking ability. Like something I'll do, sounds kind of gross, by if I didn't have the shoe spray around, which horrifying, I would spit on my palm and clean off my shoe with my palm. And so you're always worried like, oh, it's gonna make it slick, right? But what blows me away, it sounds like you got the science well, but what blows me away is
settling in.
Getting ready.
In Mallorca, doing some deep water soloing, you would think that you would need like pristine dryness, but it's surprising. Like even if it's just kind of not wet, as long as you're not dripping water, that's not what messes you up. You don't slip, like unless you're. I always say like you should save some shoes for Mallorca, like so that you can get them all salt watery and nasty. And it's fine to climb in shoes that are a little damp, but if you have a hole in the toe and you're literally gushing out water every step, that's not good. But I've never slipped off from dampness, surprisingly.
Yeah. So the cool thing about climbing rubber and like the spit trick, like one, you're like the water, the liquid is helping you remove the particulate. So that's part of it. But also when you're doing that, like when you look at your hand afterwards, what color is it?
It's gross.
It's black. You're actually removing a layer of the rubber off the top. And it's like when you bite into an apple and it starts to turn brown, that rubber oxidizes over time. And one of the main things you're doing when you do that spit trick and like rubbing it is you're removing that thin, most oxidized layer of rubber that's sitting on top of the shoe, getting to that fresh stuff underneath. In college, I was working on something that had like the foothold was the crux, and I'd bring out sandpaper and razor blades because I'd have like a couple of goes, and then I would literally like shave a millimeter off the shoe because I needed completely fresh rubber and a right angle edge to like have my foot stick on the thing. Anyway, very niche, but like it makes it makes a difference. And the thing that the shoe spray does is it deoxidizes the rubber. That's like the key thing that it does. Yes, you're wiping it, and that's also cleaning the particulate off, but it's deoxidizing the rubber so that it's tacky again and kind of regains the what's called mechanical keying properties of the rubber, where like, and this goes for skin too. This is why, like, depending on how sweaty you are, and we all kind of have preferences for temperature and whatever, where like some people will like breathe on their hands to get them more moist. They're trying to soften it up. So like what you want from both your skin and the shoe is you want the texture of the rock to kind of deform the rubber or your skin. And then you want to be able to apply like force to that, like oftentimes like a shear force, and have your skin maintain like kind of the mechanical property to hold that, whether it's texture or crystal or something in your skin, and not tear. So like if your skin is too hard, you're not getting like good keying into the skin, or if the rubber's too hard. If it's too soft, that's when you like tear your skin, or you like the rubber rolls or the crystal tears through your shoe rubber. So I mean, it's why people have quivers of shoes. I have like, if I'm going to the South, I will antihydral. I'll like prep my skin differently than if I'm going to a desert climate or somewhere else. Cause like you're trying to optimize for that mechanical keying depending on rock type, skin type, temperature, humidity. You can get real nerdy about
with
it.
Yeah.
Oh, that wasn't nerdy at all. So, okay, this is another tangent, but it just makes me think of something that we talk about, Will, that is nerdy. It is down to the absolute details. And I think y'all are known for that in your brand is caring about training, caring about being the best you can be. But I would say a conversation that we often have is how caught up people get into the minutia of training. And I guess, how do you balance this almost juxtaposition about caring about the most minute details, yet really acknowledging that, I mean, for one thing, just to have fun, you should be out there climbing. We love climbing, and we love, like Michael said, we love climbing together. I would say the best thing to increase my climbing is being with friends that I love. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of curious how you square that in your mind. And I mean, Will, you're probably out of breath from explaining the science to us. If someone else wants to jump in, and you see how those are a little different.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is, to Will, that is fun. The mechanical keying, the nerdiness of it all is part of the fun, and I think that goes for a lot of people. Like, yeah, maybe you, and there's certain things that, like, you know, I definitely lean into, and like taping and the details of like how it's like. We've had conversations. We just talked about brushing for 15 minutes. I don't know how long that was, but we have conversations about how to tape at tension. Like what width are you using, and like how many wraps are you doing? Where does it end? Where does it stop? And like that's all kind of fun. So I don't think it's like one or the other there, but there is like a certain level of it where, like, you know, picking shoes, like having a quiver is nice, but just like knowing that you can get something done with whatever is kind of a good place to be too. Like I like being like, I don't need the Drago to get in this. Like I can use the shoe and like just do it anyway. Yeah. So there's a level of like having fun with the nerdiness, but also not getting carried away with it, and like being able to just go climb and like focus on the climbing. Yeah. You know,
we use a slogan on some of our stuff is always a good time, not always fun.
Go. Well, I was gonna kind of call back to you. For me, I feel like it's the word you said, which is ritual, and I sort of I compartmentalize a lot of the nerdiness. I think because it's when I'm climbing and going climbing, like I want to kind of exist in my feeling brain, not this like hyper over intellectualized thing, but that part is also fun to me, like Quinn said. So I think for me, the way it goes, I go about it in practice is I have these times, and whether they're conversations or whatever, where I'm going deep into this stuff, and maybe I learn something or come to some conclusions about behavior I want to like use in my climbing, and I I sort of create a ritual around it, where when I'm out climbing and doing those things, I'm not thinking about doing them. They're habits that I've created and rituals that I sort of go through. And then in those moments, I am just hanging with my friends and going climbing and doing whatever. And if I forgot to bring the shoe that would have been perfect for this thing, I'm absolutely not sweating it. And I'm just going to do it anyway. But then I can also kind of have those other times where I let the nerd flag fly and go for it. But I'm not as neurotic as I sound when I'm out with the boys, and they can back me up on that.
It's like second nature to you, like doing that whole. You have your system, and you're not even thinking about it, and then it just like then you focus on the climbing. It makes it more fun, like being able to not have a split because you taped properly and all that stuff. Like doing things properly makes you be able to enjoy the climbing more.
Yeah, I think where you said it makes it more fun, I think that's something that's really interesting where, I don't know, when you love something, you just go in so deep into all these little nooks and crannies. You talk about, you guys were calling up boulders by name. Oh, Michael, is that the one that, it's just funny how we literally name our boulders, and talk about beta and the right shoe and everything. And so I think it stems out of just going deep. And of course, I never shy away from that. Although, it's funny because, that's what we have to do when we're not doing the thing is we have to talk about it. But I think we all still associate those moments in climbing when you just are just in there doing it and everything clicks. And I doubt that, it's almost like you want to tape the right way so that you don't have to think about the tape.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that we got a little esoteric and philosophical there. And there was one other in that realm that I wanted to talk about because we did a video and like I said, I wanted to show up and do well. I'm just, I have ego involved. I want to do my best. I want to show up and I want to try to keep up. And throughout the week, I came in and I was like, wow, Quinn, you're strong. Michael, you're strong. Will, you're a little injured.
We're all a little injured.
I was talking to Will about this on the side. Yeah, they're strong. They're board lords. Wherever you want, whatever. They excel at board climbing. And then we talked about how there's another notch, and you see, I don't know, pick your name in the board lord videos. They're all quite excellent, and I don't want to take anything away from you guys and your excellence that I'm just excited to try to keep pace with. And then we even said there's another level that, because you guys get to, you literally see the best in the world come through. I don't know about on a regular basis, but you have seen the best of the best continually. And so, I just wanted to kind of talk about how you get to see, the notches and the infinite levels. We used to, on our last pod, I think the term was turtles all the way down. And so I'm joking about it's turtles all the way up. There's just strength after strength after strength. And my hunch is in 5 years, there'll be another notch. And so just, we're talking about progression, about getting better. And I just kind of want to explore that idea of we're all on our own journey, and you get love of nerding out. But although you can continue to nerd out, you're probably not going to be the one to do the world's first V20. And so, just this idea of falling in love with progression on these boards, using it for our own progression. And I think you're a good person to talk to about this because, as Will, you're incredibly strong. You climb V15, but you get to see the, notches after notches after notches. And what's your pursuit like? And what do you think is like at the principle and heart of progression that shows that someone like you who is great, but still even gets to encounter greatness and you still are chasing and enjoying it all along the way?
Yeah. Well, one, I'm not entirely sure I've climbed V15. I would like to do enough of them that I like feel it,
Feel it in your heart.
Where I'm like,
that's where it counts, maybe, right?
I've done it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the cliche stuff like comparison is the thief of joy. there's always someone better than you at something. It's always going to be like that. And I think one of the cool things about climbing is it's a very personal thing that you get to do, but it also has this community aspect built into it. And I think that's something that's unique and cool about climbing. And I think when if you get too tied up into, the comparison and the ego and all that, I don't know, it really does take away from the enjoyment value for me, at least. And it also takes away from the kind of secondary positive effects of going about climbing that occur in my life and kind of have to do with me as a person. And yeah, I've been in places where I've really gone down that road, and I, in some ways, maybe even climbed better. But I wasn't getting as much out of it. I wasn't having as much fun. It took me to places I wasn't psyched about, and ultimately not worth it. But as far as what progression looks like for me moving forward, and I'm sure we'll all have kind of different answers to this, but I'm 35 now. I need a lot more rest. I think it's been interesting to me I in some ways almost feel like I'm learning to climb all over again. My training needs to change. My life is different now, and kind of managing when I can get out and where I can go. And I can't always go to the things that maybe 25-year-old me would have been super psyched on. And I've found enjoyment in things that when I was 25, I would have scoffed at. And now I'm like, nah, man, I can go out to this thing that maybe it's not the sickest boulder in the world, but I have half an afternoon to go out, and I'm going to have fun today, and enjoy this and push myself. And I think we all kind of are, to some extent, going through that exact same thing. And it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're just starting, have been doing it for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, whether you're Jimmy Webb and climbing some of the hardest boulders in the world, or us throwing down on a piece of plywood in a warehouse in the industrial district of Denver. We're doing the same thing, and that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard not to compare yourself in this sport. It's a weird sport. It's this is it's community based, but it has nothing to do with anybody else at the same time. It's your pursuit. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm about to be 35. We're not getting any younger, and I mean, honestly, my own progression is interesting because, coming from the South, it was easy to get to boulders. It was easy to project things. I could literally step feet outside of my car and just do those things. But living out here, I've had to kind of teach myself to go project again. And I to be honest, I'm just getting there. I'm trying to really get myself to project because it's more of an endeavor out here. And it's also I don't know, I love spending an afternoon on a board and doing volume, a lot of things rather than focusing on one thing or one move. But, I don't have a lot of time left to still progress, to be honest. And so I'm my own progression is kind of just learning right now. For me, I'm trying to learn how to make myself show up and get out more. I know that sounds like something that you learn, pretty early on, but, just being a lazy individual and being out here and having to hike to every little thing, it's kind of, I mean, I'm being honest. I mean, I don't have a lot of progression time left, so I'm trying to jump on things more often. But
yeah, Quinn, I want to toss it to you, but sure. I just want to point out that Quinn, you're 20. Are you 25?
25, yeah.
Yeah.
A little different.
Well, it is a little different. But the other joke, I don't know if this will make it into the video that we did, is I said something along the lines of, it's 70 degrees and sunny, mm-hmm. and I am just where I want to be. I am with a great crew. inside on a fun spray wall. I found that really interesting, but I'm just wondering how you view it, because you're still progressing, and we were saying how you are extremely powerful and strong, and maybe, I don't know, it's hard for me to say that technique. Oh, you look really technical on the board, actually. But yeah, what is it like for you seeing the best of the best come through? Mm-hmm. And what does it make you think about finding joy? I mean, I'll hand it off on that.
Yeah, let me think. I think like when I initially started climbing, I spent so many hours, like futile hours in the shop, just like not really understanding how to approach like my training and everything. And so I was like exhausted all the time, but and getting really strong, and my sessions look totally different now. Like I'm like way more focused and climb, I used to go like 5 days on, and just like not think anything of it. And I could maybe still do that. I might be young enough, but I don't think it is helpful for me to do that. And that's progression in it of itself. Just understanding how to like become a better climber for myself, and like that means maybe fewer sessions, more focused. But yeah, to your point about people coming through the shop, I mean, the first like 2 weeks of me being at Tension was like a whirlwind, because I was like, I think it was around the time that the World Cup was happening in Vail at the time, and we had some freaks come through. Some freaks, like truly,
blow your mind.
It was the German team, and then like, Matt Foltz was like always in there, and it was both aspirational. Like I wanted to be, it was cool to be like a part of that, like to see it. And I'm like climbing with them, like, and it was inspiring, but also like, I was like, whoa, they are on like a totally different plane. Like they're here and I'm here. But yeah, I think, just spending so much time in there has like made me just become a better climber. Like you put the hours in, I guess. And I think other than maybe Will, I've spent the most time in that training center. I'll take that, I think. I mean, in the past, would you guys agree? Am I talking?
No,
okay.
Yeah.
I just, in like, I have tapered off a little bit, and because I'm trying to like be more focused with that training. Yeah, I think also back to the campusing thing, like there was a moment where I was campusing the same V grade as I could just climb regular. Like that's what we were dealing with, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not the case anymore.
It's cool to see seeing people walk, like come through, like what he was just saying, like it's cool to see what's possible. Like, and I was kind of telling, this is kind of like a side note about it, but like I was telling you yesterday, like most pros, like the names, like they're all really well-rounded to a certain very high V grade, but then they've all got their thing that they're good at. And that was always the most interesting part to me, is when some big name, like seeing Magos come in there, having Daniel in there all the time, like they've all got their thing, and that's really cool to like see and identify. And that thing, like they might be the best in the world at that. So witnessing that in person is a really cool thing to just understand what can happen and what the possibilities are.
Well, what I take from that is, first of all, I love the comparison as the thief of joy from Will. I think that is important. I won't say that I've totally internalized that and figured that out.
Easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah. And I have heard some stories of some amazing stuff. When you said Matt Foltz and then you said Magos, I think I've told this story before, but I remember Daniel Fong, who is quite a strong climber, climbing with Matt Foltz. Yeah. Magos comes in and they look at each other. They say, maybe we should quit climbing.
Yeah. It made them rethink everything.
Yeah.
It's like,
and it's nuts because like I look at somebody like Foltz and I'm like, maybe I should quit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So there's always that.
It turtles all the way up.
It turtles all the way up.
There's levels.
Levels to it.
But what I also heard there is that when you look at really good climbers, they actually don't have glaring weaknesses. They're well-traveled. I think I know this was just a random grade to throw out there, but you're like, they're all 8B they're 8B at everything. So that's V13. I don't care what it is that you throw at them. They're still V13 strong, which sounds really up there, but for for the best of the best, perhaps that's not as impressive. V13 now gets flashed on the reg, but then also I like that thing pointing out that people have their superpower that they may literally be world class at, and I think recognizing that and leaning into it and using it as a tool all along the way, that's important. Just like we all have our different strengths when we're doing certain climbs on the boards, which is wild, how we will do those climbs differently when there's only 4 holds anyways. Find that superpower and let it rip when you need it. That's cool. Okay, you guys, last one for you. Where are boards going? I have a hunch that the TB3, I'm just making up a name, you guys didn't, will not quite look like the TB2. And so, any thoughts? I don't know who wants to grab the mic for that one, but yeah.
Yeah. We have thoughts that maybe we'll hold some of them close to the chest, but I don't know, man. The more I think about it, there's been talk of boards in the future might have a lot of dimension, which I think a part of that is true, right? Like we're dealing with flat planes, and I feel like a lot of the shapes that we put into the TB2 give a little bit more of a 3-dimensional feel than I think traditionally was there. But going further from that, we talk about the beast, and it's 3 angle changes, right? And so there is a level to that where you might say, well, there's they're going to be angled boards and stuff like that, and and that may be true, but I think we need to bring it back to the central, I think most important aspect, which is that community. And what I think people don't really think about a lot of the times is the more variables with the variability as far as the changeability of a board, the more it fractures that community. So there may be a system in the future that does have a bit of dimension baked into it, but you got to think that dimension, you don't want to see that moving a lot, because if somebody, let's say there's a break in the middle of the board a couple times, but that break is adjustable. If you adjust that, then everybody else in the world has to adjust it to climb the same things you're climbing. And nobody's going to do that because it takes away that core component of boards. So that's what I'll say is I think the future of boards kind of looks a lot like what it does now. I think you may see some systems that have dimension. I was thinking about the other day, one cool avenue that I don't know that we probably wouldn't do, but let's take a company like Mimic or those guys that are doing 3D situations. This is just I kind of thought about this for a bit. I could see a system in the future that is specific to facilities, right? These aren't things you're going to have at home. They need to have big boards. They need to be at least 12-12. Some might need to be on those bigger adjustable boards. But you think of a company like Mimic where they're doing replicas of actual climbs. I think it could be cool, and I haven't thought this through. I'm sure there's a lot of holes in it, but let's say Mimic, a company like Mimic comes out with a board, and the facility puts in a 12x12, and you sell a Joe's Valley set, and in the Joe's Valley set you've got 5 to 10 just world-class classics that are mimics and replicas of things from Joe's Valley, let's say. So you put up the Joe's Valley set, and you've got let's just talk Wheels of Fire. You got Jitterbug over there. You got this full board that has all of these world-class classics. That could accomplish a lot of things, right? There's a lot less people that travel to crags than you would think. There's a lot of people that don't go anywhere. So that gives them sort of this firsthand experience of these actual replicas that are sitting outside somewhere. Granted, that set would have to come with volumes to create the dimension. There's a lot of things that to make that, but that could be a really cool way that it would go. But I think that dimension is probably the next thing. But again, there is a limit to that. So that's my take.
Dude, I do want to hand this off to someone else, but I just love that what you said was community. I feel like that's this thread that's interesting, that even when we traced all the history, it's still community. I mean, we all love sending, but man, community is just really important. My pushback, I'm just talking.
Yeah.
I know you didn't think
Poke
this through,
holes.
so I'm not, is that I think that the mistake there is thinking that outdoor climbing is being raised in status and people indoor climbing want to mimic outdoor climbing, where I think that perhaps the test piece that I just set yesterday is the Wheels of Fire.
Sure.
And that people chase that. And that's where my other hot take would be. My argument would be that the world's first V19 will be on board. Now, whether it'll be accepted or not, I actually think that in my argument there, it has to be accepted. Like, I couldn't say that, So
let me put it to you this way. There's likely something on our board already very close. Good. I mean, you saw the Board Lord episode. We set up 15. Those guys kind of confirmed. They're like, yeah, this feels every bit of 15. I mean, ratchet it down a few degrees.
By the way,
you
may not have heard me say this, but on the podcast after you guys released that, me and Tim had a little chat about that. I was like, Tim, is it V15? Yeah. Like, cause I was like, I don't know, like those holds don't look too bad. And it is. I mean, I don't know how qualified I am to say that, but I'm like, okay, these moves go. Like, it's very different to say, like, it's much harder to see a one move V15. It's harder to conceptualize what a one move V15 is. And I just found it really interesting that that's arguably the hardest climb on a board that's repeatable right now. I'm just going to put that out there. These guys didn't say that. That's just me. And I found that really interesting that there is a V15 out there on, what was it, 10,000 Days? No. That was the other one you guys.
It's called Deus Ex Machina. And we set it for 45 degrees, but shit, I mean, put it to 50. Like, then what is it? Because when those
probably
guys,
still goes.
If you watch that video, before they figured out like key beta, they were like, dude, this is harder than 15. Like, this is pushing 16. And they figured out beta, and they're like, okay, now I can see 8C. Like, this feels more 8C. But yeah, man, I mean, there's adjustability. Like, you just crank that thing a little lower. Like, how far can it go before it's like undoable, right? Like, I don't know. Like, what's that thing feel like at 50? But anyway, I'll let you maybe hand it off to you on future boards.
Yeah, I mean, I get asked a lot, and so one of the things I do want to say, like, people will come like wanting to buy a TB2, and they're like, if I buy this, are you going to make a TB3 in like 2 years? And I'm like, no, dude, like, don't worry. The TB2 honestly it was essentially a 7-year project.
Yeah, dude.
So like anybody out there thinking about the TB2, don't stress. I think to piggyback off of what Michael said, I think, and we've discussed this arguably too much.
Yes. We talk about
this a lot, but I think that the thing that we have really learned through all of this, like, is it's the community. That's actually the secret sauce of this stuff. And I don't know that, like, a board in the way that we're kind of conceiving of it, and even talking angle breaks and dimension, like, that's sort of just the natural. People have been talking about that. Like, even or like when we were developing the TB1, we were talking about that. So, like, that's like a very obvious progression, I think, but I don't know that it adds enough value to actually be worth it. Because what Michael's saying is really important. And it actually gets a little bit to what we were talking about over coffee the other day, is when you start adding variables and you're talking about multiplying 2 together and then 3, like, all of a sudden the permutations of what you're dealing with just grow exponentially. And how can you build a community around that? And so for us, having landed on, like, the real nugget here has the value is the community. And so if we do anything moving forward, it will be founded in that as like a first principle, and it will have to grow from there.
Can I say something really quick? One more thing before I hand it over. there are a lot of things that we baked in to this system because we were thinking about that fracturing of a community. So like a lot of, the same podcast, and we may have said it yesterday, but the absence of a kicker, right? And having the choice to have one and not have one. Like every time you bake something like that in and you bake in a choice, like or like a variation or whatever, it can fracture it. So like for example, the TP1, you could buy the thing with a kicker, you could buy with a half kicker, or you could buy it with no kicker. Every one of those choices gives you a different result in your database for how many climbs show up. So like that's all part of building one of these systems that the community has got to be forefront, and you can't fracture that thing too much because it just isolates the experiences, and that's at the core of what this is. You can't do that. So anyway,
anything left, Quinn? I think they covered that pretty good.
They kind of covered all the bases. I feel like there's some maybe like training capabilities that you could have with like boards in the future. Somehow, like we've talked about this, like pressure sensors in the holds to tell you how much you're weighting and stuff like that. But like it comes like that's an expensive thing to do. Trying to do that would be like really
and
difficult.
Even those things, like they're cool and it would be neat. Like if someone was like, here it is, I'd be like, well, hell yeah. Mm-hmm. But there are other things where I don't end up convinced of like the practical application of how that thing plays out and the value that it delivers. Like, is this actually something we give a shit about? Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's even something we talked about on the TB1 and especially around hold design is if like every hold, whether it's a handhold or a foothold, needs to do something. Like if it does something that this other thing does, then why is it here? And so like we were ruthless with that. And I think when you're doing anything, like it behooves you to think through it to that level and not just like make something to make something. When we did the wood holds over again for the TB2, we looked at the TB1 and we're like, there's two holds on the TB1. They may as well be the same hold. So why are they two different holds? Mm-hmm. So let's just make one that does that job well. And now there's one, and then we'll make another one that does something different. And so I think that's a large part of where the diversity on the TB2 comes from. And it's why spray walls are so sick too, everything is like very different. And to some extent, having things that are similar is also important. And it's why we have repeats of a certain hold. Like, why am I going to make two different holds that do exactly the same thing? I'll put the same hold on twice. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that, especially when the holds are designed in a way to where, like, when it's oriented like this, you're going to have a particular experience. When it's oriented like this, it's another experience. When you're using it relative to this other hold, it may as well be a different hold. And so you can, this is just like from the product design perspective and thinking about manufacturing and sourcing and material and all that other stuff, it starts to make even more sense. But that's its own kind of nerd tangent.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I also think that you're going to see a lot of, not to call him, but I think somebody's going to mimic what we've done with the TB2 system, because basically where we started our conversation about those foundational, like spray wall asymmetry, system symmetry, we baked both of those foundational aspects into this system. And it is the only, like, it makes so much sense. It's stupid. So like, I think that systems will go that route where they will actually give you the ability to change the character of what the board does for you, like on a fundamental level, as you grow and progress in climbing, an adaptable platform, if you will. So,
damn, that was good, you guys. That was really good. I want to just emphasize again that community aspect. I love that you guys, I didn't know that going into this. That to me is a big part of everything that I do in climbing, and why I'm attracted to these systematized boards that have the community behind them instead of the spray wall. I will not put a spray wall up in my house to climb on by myself. And so I'm glad that I was tapping into something you guys are emphasizing. And I just also got to point out that one of the reasons why the second podcast came around and the video came to be was just, I was blown away when we first talked, Will, about the care that you put into designing the TB2. I even used it as one of the reels in my Instagram because there was just this deep dive that you went into, and I can see it in your crew around it. And so just after what you said, just brought me back. I was like, oh yeah, these guys care. And so thanks for doing a video. Thanks for including me in a video and showing me the tour of the board that you all created and explaining how that caring came to materialize into something. And then thanks for sitting down and God, yeah, going deep on boards. I do want to see if I can pull a pro tip out of you guys. Usually we have a longer plan and everything. And so if you don't have anything, or if anyone wants to jump in, it could be a pro tip on the boards. I mean, brushing clearly was a very passionate topic.
That's a pro tip.
But if anyone has a pro tip, let's hear them.
Pro tip.
I guess I've kind of got one. We're talking about boards here, so I'll just keep it there. We've tried very hard to sort of innovate and evolve what boards can be. And in the same way, like what my pro tip to climbers who frequent boards is to broaden what you would expect to do on these systems. Like, as they innovate, you can do more types of movement. You can do different styles. You can really especially with like a system like ours, like you can really focus more on what it is that you need to be better at and actually focus on your progression rather than visiting the system and doing the same thing every time just because. So I would just say, pro tip, when it comes to boards, like really look at what you're doing. Think about your overall motivations. Make sure that they align, and broaden your thinking. The boards are getting better, and they're innovating in a lot of ways. So don't just do all the same things. And you'll watch our video, and it kind of ties back to that. But just think about it a little harder and maybe broaden your mind a little bit. That's my pro tip.
Pro tip. Mine would be just, again, leaning on the community thing, like climb with people. There's so much benefit to that. And use the board. Like, as it gets more legitimized, like the boards are going to become more and more of a thing, I think, moving forward. And so jump on, like do it, try it out, go climb on the boards with a bunch of people, use the app,
make a board account.
Yeah, make a board account.
Josh, where's your board account?
Yeah, true.
It's Joshua Horsley. Yeah.
Oh, it's
You
your
got
main
one?
account.
Oh, I have. Yeah. Oh.
You don't have a separate
you
board
mean
account?
my Instagram? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, your Instagram account.
It's kind of when you guys said board, everyone has their own
Yeah,
Instagram
we all
board
three
account.
have
It's the barn board, but it's kind of outdated. It was
Okay,
during COVID.
okay.
I built a
Dude,
board
get back
in my
on it.
barn.
I'm trying to see what you're
Yeah,
doing
we
in
want to
there.
watch.
Okay. I'll get back there, but I like that people community. Good thread. I mean, this is also setting a record for the largest person podcast we've ever done. So,
Awesome.
community, you guys.
Yeah.
Well,
Did you have a pro tip?
Mine would just be very general. Care about what you do.
There you go.
Whether it's board climbing or rock climbing or brushing or taping your tip, just give a shit.
I think I'm going to add, be intentional. Like, I think that's super key. Like, again, like I said, I spent so many hours futilely in that training center. Just be intentional. Just like focus. Be like, okay, I fell, but why? I brushed this hold wrong. Like, let me do it properly. Like, just be intentional.
I love it. Okay, guys, I'm going to plug a few things for you. Tension climbing. Got the crew here. I will say that one of the reasons why I like this brand is because I feel like it's a if you know kind of brand. I mean, people all do know tension, but it's a little different than, say, actually, I'm not going to say anything else. Sorry, that's not what I'm here for. And I feel like hopefully everyone else does too, that Testpiece occupies a bit of that same space. And so thanks for collaborating with me. I also I'm going to plug the video that we did. Go to the Tension YouTube channel to check out the video on the tour of the TB2 board.
Can you put it in show notes?
Oh, it'll be in the show
down?
notes.
Okay,
Of course. I also was going to plug, we can plug Undeniable Vibes, which is a fun series on the Tension YouTube channel. And Ego Death was another awesome,
thanks, man.
awesome one there.
God module.
Yeah,
there you go.
and giving a shit. That was like an insane passion project from Michael, and
it drove me
impeccable.
nuts for a minute, but I don't know. Every so often, like I'm very fortunate to do a lot of the things I love and put my creative endeavors like into this brand. And every now and then, you kind of got to do something for yourself. And when you do that, like you got to make sure that you kind of. I try to do better than I did the time before, and that's always hard to do, especially when you have less time to do it. But that was fun, and yeah, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll remind people is that we're doing a giveaway. There's also a giveaway on the Tension video. So on that YouTube video that covers me and Tim at the Tension shop on the TB2, they're doing their own giveaway. And I'll just remind everyone that I set 2 test pieces, one on the mirror wall, one on the spray wall, and go do them. Take a video of yourself. It's got to be uncut video. That's how we roll. Send them to me, or no, post them on your board account.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Tag Tension, tag Testpiece. You'll get a shirt from me and a special
A custom block or flashboard or whatever.
Yeah, your
Exactly.
choice.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
Just let us know.
And also, just so that we make sure that giveaway is accessible to all grades, climb your favorite classic, post it, do the same thing, put it on your board account, tag us, and tell us why it's your favorite classic, and win the same stuff. So thanks, boys.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and
Really appreciate
Josh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, dude,
this
this
is
is excellent.
It's been so awesome, and yeah, it's really fun to have these conversations and get them out there. So
Yeah,
we
man.
really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Well, then let's do it again.
All right.
Perfect.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like even more content, go to patreon.com/testpiece. And while you're at it, share this podcast with someone you know who would love it. And please leave us a review or rating at wherever you get your podcasts. We've also got tons of great content on YouTube and Instagram, so don't forget to like and subscribe there. Okay, see you next week.